Welcome to Open on BronxNet. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, inviting you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. April is Autism Awareness Month, and providing support and services for families and children with autism here in the Bronx is a recent Mother Cabrini Health Foundation grant recipient, the Rose F. Kennedy Center at Montefiore. Joining us now to share more are Dr. Lisa Heidi Shulman, Neurodevelopmental Pediatrician, and Dr. Maria Valicenti-Mcdermott, Developmental Behavioral Pediatrician at the Rose F. Kennedy Children's Evaluation and Rehabilitation Center at Montefiore. Welcome, doctors. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Our pleasure. One of our favorite topics to talk about.
Yes, and something you know a lot about, right? So can you please tell us about Montefiore's Rose F. Kennedy Center here in the Bronx?
Sure. Well, for 64 years, the Rose F. Kennedy Center has been a resource to families of the Bronx who have children with the full range of developmental disabilities. This is a kind of one-stop shopping model where medical specialists come together with educational and developmental specialists, 20 different specialties in total, to meet the medical diagnostic needs and also provide therapies for these full range of developmental disabilities. And autism, we serve about 7,000 children with the full range of disabilities each year, and about 1,500 of those children have autism. And about 500 come for weekly therapies here. So this is an important resource, and we're very committed to our Bronx community.
Thank you, doctor, for sharing. And can you elaborate on some of the services and the support that children and families receive here, specifically with autism?
Sure. Well, one of the most important services to recognize is to make a diagnosis. So children do not come out of the womb with a diagnosis of autism or other developmental disabilities written on their forehead. It's a process of figuring out, why is this child not speaking? Why are they not socializing? Why are they not walking or hearing? And so one of the main missions of the center is diagnosis. Right. Another aspect of important services that we provide are making sure the child hears well, making sure the child's dental care is met. There are primary care services. There's ophthalmology to check the eyes. There are nutrition services. There's genetics, neurology if the child has seizures. And the backbone of the program are developmental and behavioral pediatricians who are physicians who specialize in child development and oversee and maintain a long-term relationship with many of the families we serve. After the diagnosis is made by our multidisciplinary developmental team that includes psychologists, speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, social workers, then sometimes children, certainly one of the main jobs of the center is to connect families with appropriate services and systems outside the center. So early intervention, special preschool, have an individualized educational plan in school to provide needed services and accommodations. But sometimes certain services aren't available or fall through the cracks, or the child needs specialized medical equipment like braces or wheelchairs, or other things that need to be supplied at a specialty program. Sometimes children who can be in a mainstream class educationally still need therapies to help them develop the social skills that they need due to their diagnosis of autism. And so about 500 children each week come to the center in order to receive those therapies that allow them to function in a least restrictive classroom environment and allow them to reach their potential. And it's kind of a safety net for families at each transition from early intervention to special preschool to special education or mainstream elementary school, high school, and even adulthood. And we do have adult services as well.
Yeah. Thank you, doctor. And to support that extensive work, Montefiore's Rose F. Kennedy Center recently received the Mother Cabrini Health Foundation Award. Congratulations for that, and thank you for your extensive work in our community. Can you tell us about this award and what the funding will help support in the center?
Sure. So this grant from Mother Cabrini Health Foundation will allow us to expand services for children with autism, including therapies to improve their social skills, feeding therapy to help with feeding difficulties, short-term applied behavioral analysis to help with challenging behaviors, and a parent support group. So we are really happy.
That is wonderful news. And since it is Autism Awareness Month, a lot of folks may not know the different definitions and the different spectrums of autism, doctors. Can you help us define autism, first of all, and understand different spectrums of autism?
Sure. So these days, there is one title for the full umbrella of conditions and variety of difficulties that fall under autism, and that is autism spectrum disorder.
Mhm.
And autism spectrum disorder is, at its core, a social problem.
Mhm.
An individual with autism can have any level of intellectual functioning, from being severely delayed to literally being intellectually and academically gifted.
Mhm.
Individuals with autism can have a complete lack of ability to speak, or they can talk too much, often about their favorite topic.
Mhm.
And they can be everything in between there. The idea about autism is it's a behavioral diagnosis.
Got it.
And as you see on the screen now, the different subcategories of autism are set based on how much support does this individual need.
Mhm.
And they function independently in school and benefit from, let's say, some outside social skills functioning and be a level 1. Or do they have very significant needs because they are nonverbal and they have significant cognitive or intellectual disabilities, learning disability that requires them to have really very significant support to function?
Right.
It's a behavioral diagnosis and can be caused by many, many different etiologies. And that's why genetics these days is an important aspect to help figure out what has caused autism in a particular child. And that's part of the medical workup. So again, autism is basically at its core a social difficulty impacting how an individual has conversations, shares emotion, their use of eye contact, personal space, or what are called nonverbal communication efforts, and it affects their functioning in terms of relationships with peers and even often family members.
Absolutely.
Often there are associated restricted interests, real passions about specific things, repetitive behaviors, rigidity, and also sensitivities to things that don't bother other people.
Hmm.
So I'd like to point out that autism is not the same thing as what used to be called mental retardation or is currently called intellectual disability. It is not a behavior problem. Subsets of individuals with autism do have difficulties with cognition and behavior,
Hmm.
but they are not inherent in the diagnosis.
Right. Oftentimes, I'd like to mention that people with autism face discrimination in workplaces and in school places, among friends, et cetera, and family. So I'm glad you brought that up, doctor. And this is why it's important to highlight, autism awareness, especially during this month, but even beyond it. So thank you for breaking that down for us. Would you also be able to share the autism rates here in the Bronx in particular? How are Bronxites affected by autism?
So if you look for autism and you define social impairment, you will find it wherever you look.
Mhm.
So the prevalence rate at this time in any community should be 1 out of 54 children.
Mhm.
If you see lower rates, that means that children have not made it to the point of a diagnostic evaluation in order to receive that diagnosis.
Got it.
So I actually, before our talk right now, I did look up to see what were prevalence rates listed for the Bronx. And to be honest, I wasn't able to find them. But as a generally underserved area where there are obstacles to accessing diagnosis, I will assume it is listed as less prevalent.
Right.
But again, you have to look for it. You have to attain diagnostic expertise. And there are obstacles to that. And that's part of the reason why a center like the Rose F. Kennedy Children's Evaluation and Rehabilitation Center provides such a critical service, because we bring our autism expertise to the front door.
Yes.
Every child we see, we are determining, do they have autism? Do they have another diagnosis? And that's the mission of a center like this that sees 7,000 children a year. They are all being looked at through that diagnostic lens.
Thank you so much, doctors, again for your time. Before we go, we've run out of time, but if you can just provide more information about the Children's Evaluation and Rehabilitation Center at Montefiore, how can people get in touch and find out more information?
You can call to refer your child by calling 718-430-8500. You can email RFK CERS, our Rose F. Kennedy Children's Evaluation and Rehabilitation Center info@montefiore.org. And we welcome your question.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Drs. Lisa Heidi Shulman and Dr. Maria Valicenti-Mcdermott for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonyi.
Thank you for your work. We'll be right back here on Open BXRX Tuesday.